welcome to Football Today Team Profiles and Projections. Today we are looking at the New York Football Giants coming in our power rankings at 26 after a 6-11 season. Justin, are you familiar with this team at all?
No, I am not. Not at all.
Unfortunately, we are too familiar, right? Like maybe we will make this episode an hour and a half and just break down every single, backup linebacker, all that. But we'll try and keep it short. The Giants last year, it was not a good year, right? Coming off the playoff win, they were 30th in points per game on offense, 26 on defense. Head coach Brian Daboll's third year after coming from the Bills as their offensive coordinator. Mike Kafka's third year, he relinquished his play calling duty after being the Chiefs QB coach. And then Shane Bowen, his first year as defensive coordinator after being with the Titans for the last 4 years after a messy breakup with Wink Martindale. Justin, the season unraveled on the first drive of the year last year for the Giants, right?
Which is crazy.
A blocked field goal that goes back for a 7 and a 40-0 loss. But the worst part of it was not just that 40-0 loss and a blocked field goal. It was they lost Andrew Thomas for 8 games after that. But they finished the season 4-3 with Tyrod Taylor and Tommy DeVito after Daniel Jones' injury. You have the messy breakup with Wink Martindale. Literally everything went wrong for this team coming off of a playoff game, and yet they still won 6 games, right? When Daniel Jones got injured, Justin, last year, and Tyrod Taylor was injured simultaneously, we were like, hey, this team is at 2 wins right now. They'll probably get one more win because this is the NFL and Tyrod Taylor could come back.
It's going to get uglier.
And instead, they had a winning record, at the end of the season. Offensively, Brian Daboll's taking over play callings. Let's get into what do you think happens with this Giants team that wasn't able to get the quarterbacks that they wanted in the draft? So running it back with Daniel Jones, you lose Saquon Barkley, who's been like their offensive identity for a long time now. The offensive line, they made additions, but where are you at with this team?
I think offensively,
I asked that knowing exactly where you're at.
I think offensively, it needs to get better. I say that as a fan, and man, it has to get better, and I think it will get better because you want to know why? Because they were 30th in offensive EPA per play, they were 29th in EPA per dropback, and 31st in EPA per rush. I'm particularly looking at September and October. I kind of talk about the Giants as a fan, but really for every single NFL team, I think what every fan wants as a bare minimum is to be competitive in the months of September and October, so there's a reason to really keep watching and keep invested in the month of November and December. And I think that is basically after the Giants being 2-8 last year, and Daniel Jones, we talk about Daniel Jones tearing his ACL like week 10 or week 11 against the Raiders, but he wasn't even playing for 9-10 full games because he missed time with a neck injury during the middle of that stretch too, where Tyrod Taylor played some games like against Buffalo. Didn't look that great. The offense just needs to be better. Where the defense is going to go and what the defense can be is a whole other conversation. They add Brian Burns. That was their biggest move of the offseason. But overall, with the Giants quarterback room and the quarterback position being such a huge question mark for this Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll regime, even with Daniel Jones as a question mark, the offense in 2023 needs to start to get more explosive, and it just needs to be better than what it was last year. And I think it will be because I don't think the Giants have a bottom 3 offense.
So let's talk about Brian Daboll taking over play calling. And that is my biggest question for the Giants going into the season is how will this offense be called, right? Like Tyrod Taylor last year had the highest average depth of target of his career. He's been in the NFL for a long time. And they actually started to create explosive plays
numbers on that.
Rather than the year before where only Matt Ryan had a lower average depth of target than Daniel Jones, and they had the best turnover rate in the NFL, right? And they ran the ball pretty well. So, now that you've lost Saquon Barkley from this group, how will this offense be called, right? Because, I think that is what's going in Brian Dable's head. Do I cater this 100% to Daniel Jones, or do I call an offense that I want that's looking for explosives, hoping to protect enough to create those plays, even if we have to have some negatives along the way? Or am I going to play this to Daniel Jones style, which is low average depth of target, quick game, and using his legs? And I actually think it's going to be the first. I think Brian Daboll is going to – I think he got a little bit of a taste back in his mouth for the explosives without a particularly explosive quarterback in Tyrod Taylor. and he's gonna demand that of his quarterback to start making tougher throws.
Yeah, and I also think the offensive line improved as the year went on for the New York Giants. And when you had Josh Azudu, who, and if you're sitting there saying, who is Josh Azudu? Exactly. When you have guys like Josh Azudu, they signed Justin Pugh off the couch, and that was like a meme for a couple weeks, but it was the truth. Signed him off the couch, and he's light as a feather and brought stability at guard despite not being very good. So the Giants' offensive line was in a tough spot at the start of the year, especially when Andrew Thomas goes down, and then Thomas comes back, and that's when you see some more explosive stuff. Now, is it Jones? Is it the line? Is it? I think it's like a lot of everything. But here's the reality of it: the Giants had 9 pass plays of 20+ yards during the first 10 weeks of the season, when the game margin was between 0 to 21 points. That was 25th in the NFL, and 4 of those plays came versus the Cardinals week 2. By the way, so a little less than 50% of their 20+ yard passing plays came from one game. And then weeks 11 through 18, they had 14 pass plays of 20+ yards, which also includes a stretch with Tommy DeVito, by the way. And that ranked 12th in the NFL during that span. So there's people in the building, and really there's people that are asking, including myself, why is it different with guys like Tyrod Taylor and even Sprinkle and Tommy DeVito? But why was it so different under Tyrod Taylor versus Daniel Jones, who people are acting like Daniel Jones is Jamarcus Russell, and he's not. He's better than that, but he's not worth $40 million. So he's somewhere in the middle.
The most important thing for this offense this year, because we'll talk about the receiving group is actually kind of fun.
Yeah, it's intriguing.
The most important part for this Giants offense is Andrew Thomas, right? An all-pro left tackle. And you look at the splits with and without Andrew Thomas, Daniel Jones, and since 2021, averages 50 more yards per game with Andrew Thomas in the lineup. His touchdown rate is higher. His interception rate without Andrew Thomas is over double. His sack rate is over 3.4% higher without Andrew Thomas. He is not a great player when Andrew Thomas is there, but he is a significantly better, right? He's dealt with bad offensive lines, but when his left tackle, when his blind side has been taken care of, it's just made him a totally different quarterback, where 21 touchdowns and 10 interceptions versus 6 touchdowns and 8 interceptions. That is the key, right? And that's why you saw the offense just totally crumble in the beginning of the season last year, because they were missing Andrew Thomas. They could not operate anything. Jones was struggling in general. They're asking him to do more, and he just was not delivering on that. But even if he did deliver on that, it still would have been a bad offense because of how bad the offense was. I mean, they gave it the second most sacks in NFL history last year. So we'll talk about the rest of the offensive line, but Andrew Thomas is the key. And here's why he's the key: because they have a wide receiver group that can be successful, right? Like, you have a fun group of receivers with a good play call in Brian Dable. Malik Nabers is this type of guy that can hit the running and hit 1,000 yards, right? Even if the offense is bad, I think we expect Malik Nabers to have a really good rookie year. Yep. Wan'Dale Robinson, who's a solid slot wide receiver, he's stuck in there. And then the question is, who's wide receiver 2? Is it Darius Slayton, who's led this team receiving 4 out of the last 5 seasons? Or is it Jalen Hyatt? But even if it's Darius Slayton, who I think it should be, Jalen Hyatt is going to create explosve, right? I think he had the highest yards per catch for anybody with 20 catches in the NFL.
Highest average up to target.
Yeah. He's someone that can do that. So if you get someone that you trust in the slot, you have a guy who's been your leading receiver for 80% of the last half decade, now moving the wide receiver 2, the 6th overall pick of wide receiver 1. Now Hyatt is can improve, but he at least gives you value in the as a deep threat of the field. And even your wide receiver 5 in Isaiah Hodgins is someone you're okay putting out there. He's a good red zone threat. Had over 100 yards in that playoff game that they won versus the Minnesota Vikings. So this wide receiver group, it's not going to be in the best rankings in the NFL group, but it's a way more than capable to create explosives. You have 3 guys who are capable of creating explosives with Nabers, Slayton, and Jalen Hyatt. So how they use them, but you're going to have to ask the quarterback to be more aggressive, right? Even if that comes with more turnovers or whatever, they're going to have to be more aggressive and create those explosive plays, because you also don't have Saquon to lean on, even though leaning on Saquon hasn't always been the best philosophy anyways for them.
Yeah, Nabers is fun, man. I know we're not necessarily on the draft class yet, but Nabers, most explosive receiver in college this past year. And something that the Giants and Joe Schoen have said is, all 3 levels of the field: short, intermediate, and deep. And that's exactly where So that's what the Giants need. They need another game-changing, game-difference player that isn't Saquon Barkley, where, Saquon Barkley since 2018, the Giants have had really one good, successful year of offense. And that's not necessarily the 2022 Giants, not really a modern-day NFL offense that you want to shape yourself after. But a guy like Malik Neighbors and his ceiling, that is the type of offense that maybe you want to shape yourself under. A receiver that can get yak, a receiver that can create, a receiver that can get open at all three levels of the field and contribute and be explosive for you.
Here's my other biggest worry for this team outside of the health of Andrew Thomas. We've talked about this a lot on our Talking Giants show. They are putting a lot of eggs in the Evan Neal basket. So they signed John Runyon Jr. from the Packers for $10 million per year. He's someone who's played both guard spots, but says he prefers left guard. They have put him at right guard because they want to help Evan Neal with the mental part of the game, right? And just have a better player next to him. Then they signed Jermaine Eleanor, who's been a good tackle for the Raiders the last couple of years, and really we love that signing, Justin, because you're like, this gives you Evan Neal insurance, right? And if Andrew Thomas goes down, you could put him at left tackle. Like, this is good. Either he's going to start at right tackle or be one of the best swing tackles in the NFL. Well, they have put him at left guard, and he's only focusing on that. So if Evan Neal stinks, which is more likely than not at this point of his career, now you got to shuffle the offensive line, which they did. They've done a lot, and it's just not something like they need to find their five, right? So if Evan Neal doesn't look good in that first preseason game, they need to pull the plug right away, because they can't afford to go 2-3 games into the year of hoping that this Evan Neal thing works out. Like, they should know. They should be able to evaluate in practice and preseason if it's going to work out, because if it doesn't work out and you play it, it can be something that can torpedo the beginning of the season, which, like you said at the beginning, is the most important part for the Giants, is to not start off so badly like they did last year.
Yeah, so I think we've been dancing around this on Talking Giants because we've gone round and round of talking about scenarios and our opinions on stuff. I'm going to let you know what my best starting five is for the New York Football Giants on the offensive line right now. And that is Andrew Thomas, Aaron Stinney at left guard, John Michael Schmitz at center, or guard interchangeable, right? You either have John Runyon at left guard or John Runyon at right guard, and then you have Aaron Stinney at either guard spot. John Michael Schmitz at center, and then Jermaine Eleanor is at right tackle. That is the lineup that I am rolling out week 1 against the Minnesota Vikings. How about you?
I would give Evan Neal the first shot in camp, right? You put that huge investment into it, but if you said, what do I think is the best right now? I would agree. I would agree with you there. How do you think the run game is going to look, right? I think they need to find an identity and master it, right? They've tried to be like, that was an issue with Brian Dable in Buffalo and Bobby Johnson's offensive line coach. They obviously fired him and brought in Carmen Brasillo from the Raiders, who had success with them. Is that, it's like, it's a mix of zone and gap, but they never had an identity as a run game. They need to figure out an identity, get the tight ends involved, get the receivers involved, and find an identity of a run offense and master it. They don't need to be a run-heavy team, but they need to figure out how they're going to run their run game and work on it. Like, really, really work. I don't want to go too detailed of talking about like training camp practice and stuff, because that's, we can with the Giants, but they need to really stress to find an identity as a run offense.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think John Runyon's going to bring some stability there at guard. Obviously, Andrew Thomas being healthy. John Michael Schmitz, year 2, possible jump up for him. I'm excited to see him as a run blocker. He could be a mauler. He's an aggressive dude. And also Devin Singletary just being an efficient running back.
He's been his entire career.
Which he's been in his entire career. Like, we're not looking for Devin Singletary to be a burner. We're not looking at him to get these runs of 10-plus yards. We're looking for Devin Singletary to keep the offense on schedule. And that's what he did in Buffalo, Brian Dable connection in Buffalo. And then even in Houston, he was not the starting running back last year. It was Dameon Pierce. Dameon Pierce did not look very good at all. Devin Singletary looked pretty solid and pretty good. And I even see some people talking in Houston right now that Devin Singletary has been, more efficient every single year of his career, more efficient than Joe Mixon. So I think it's going to be better. Like, I'm not going to sit here and be like, it's going to be explosive and it's going to be dynamic, but 31st in EPA per rush, Bobby, it's an underrated reason why the Giants offense was so bad last year is, hey, me, I'm an explosive pass guy. I'm a throw first kind of guy, but also I'm not going to sit here and say that you can have a terrible rushing offense. You need to have some sort of balance to your team.
It was awful. And it was the offensive line's fault too. And it wasn't Saquon's fault.
No.
So defensively, Shane Bowen
also getting rid.
Go,
Go ahead. No, I'm sorry.
Shane Bowen comes in with a very different approach than Wink Martindale. Like he doesn't blitz at all, besides a nickel blitz here or there or replacement blitzes. He likes to stun up front, rotate the safeties, and play a lot of cover 3 and cover 1. When you look at this Giants defense, you look at the front, right? You mentioned these first 3 names of Dexter Lawrence, Brian Burns, and Kayvon Thibodeau, and that is exciting. But you need those 3 guys to be at the top of their game. Dexter Lawrence will be top 3 defensive tackle in the NFL. We've never seen a nose tackle do what he did. Like literally not even close. No nose tackles that come even to close to doing what he's done at that position. So he's going to be amazing. Brian Burns comes over and he's a speed rusher who needs to add more power to his game and not go quiet during games. He needs to be more consistent than what he was in Carolina, right? Like he only hit double-digit sacks once. And total sacks, hits, and you say, well, sacks aren't the best teller. I agree. But in total sacks, hits, and pressures in his career, going from most recent to, going from 2023 to 21, he was 53rd, 12th, and then 23rd. Pass rush win rate, which talks about, beating a block within 2.5 seconds, 37th, 59th, and 77th. And this is only for edge players, not defensive tackles. He needs to be a guy who's top 20 in all those categories.
Yep.
Like, he cannot be a guy who just flashes greatness. He needs to be a guy that's top 20 in all those positions. And honestly, I think they need him to be a top 12 edge, which he's capable of doing, but he needs to do it. And then Kayvon Thibodeau, he was very boomer bust last year. Dominated bad offensive tackles like the Jets and Commanders and would go quiet for games at a time. And he was 71st out of 78 edges in pass rush win rate.
I mean, Brian Burns, not only did the Giants give up a 2nd-round pick, a 5th-round pick, and as we're learning from the Hard Knocks, the documentary too that's going on HBO Max right now. Dan Morgan originally was asking for 2 1s and then it was 2 2s. So we're going to see how that progresses. How the Giants wound up. It was a 2nd-round pick. Was it a 4th-round pick and then a swap of 5s?
2nd-round pick, a 5th-round pick, and then a 5th-round pick swap.
And then a pick round, so it wasn't even a 4th. So the trade from, especially when you compare it to the Los Angeles Rams a couple years ago, reportedly wanting to give up 2 1s for Brian Burns, and then the Carolina Panthers different regime to turn that down, which is absolutely crazy. But the Giants paid him a lot. But they paid him a lot, man.
And they paid him a lot. And if you look at Brian Burns, like you traded a 2nd and 5th round pick for Brian Burns, that's a great deal for the Giants. But this is where, again, if he's not a top 12 edge rusher, I look at that trade as a failure for the Giants. Because
I agree.
Because they had that money. They could have went and paid a Christian Wilkins. They could have kept Xavier McKinney and then paid one of the best guards instead of one of the middling guards of like John Runyon, and then also be able to keep their 2nd and 5th round picks. And you can even think, domino effect. Let's say they pay Xavier McKinney the 17 or 18 million per year he got. You pay an extra 10 million for either a much better guard or another offensive lineman or whatever position that they need to use that money on another player. And then maybe you don't even need to draft Tyler Newman in the 2nd round, even though I would have been okay drafting him to the same team as Xavier McKinney.
I agree.
And then you have that, like you could have, in a sense, had like 4 like premium asset players for 1, and then a 5th round pick as well. So like he needs to be a top 12 edge in the NFL, or I look at that trade as a bad trade for the Giants.
Yeah, the Giants need Brian Burns to be a 10+ sack guy every single year. I would even argue like 12, 13.
Yeah, well, just be more consistent in the metrics of total pressures and pass rush win rate.
And I was going to say 25 QB hits, and the most that he has is he's only gone over 20 twice in his career, 2020 and then 2022. So I also may think like, hey man, like I have this little theory running through my head, like optimistic Giants fan. People in NFL circles have been talking about Brian Burns for years, just waiting for him to break free from Carolina. The draft and free agency is not just what have you done for me lately? It's also about what are you going to do for me? I think the draft, you can kind of get away with asking that question in the draft a little bit more with projecting than free agency. But I just have like this optimistic Giants fan in me just has this theory that NFL people really respect Burns as a player. And then once he gets out of Carolina, the hope is, now that the Giants have him, is that the production can get better because it has to. Because the guy's getting paid almost $30 million a year.
Yeah, you can't pay him that money and then have traded for him and sacrifice other players. If the Giants had $80 million of cap space and the Brian Burns didn't stop them from paying whoever they wanted to return and adding another player, then I don't give a shit. But they did have to make sacrifices to add Brian Burns to their team.
For sure. Let's talk about how good Dexter Lawrence is.
Yeah, talk about how great Dexter Lawrence is.
Okay, I'll give you some numbers. So I'm gonna read off some stats and some numbers from October 30th, because there was a point where Dexter Lawrence got hurt last year, and then he was kind of like a rotational player because they were trying to keep him healthy. He was a warrior for staying out on the field. Dexter Lawrence on October 30th, around this time, led all interior defensive linemen with 44 pressures and was tied for the league lead with Nick Bosa at the end of October. He led all interior defensive linemen in pass rush win rate. He was fourth in the league in pass rush productivity behind Myles Garrett, Trey Hendrickson, and Micah Parsons. He was tied for second in the NFL in QB hits. And also something fun to note too, Bobby. I tweeted this out. I don't know if you saw it. I love looking at win-loss tie splits over the last 2 years. That's something to note with Dexter Lawrence. Giants wins. Dexter Lawrence has 10 sacks. Giants losses. Dexter Lawrence has 1 sack. And then the tie versus Washington in 2022, Dexter Lawrence had 1 sack. So I think the stats are clear. Dexter Lawrence gets a sack. The Giants win the game. Boom. 2-year sample size.
Let me ask you
He's
this:
good.
Is an edge player going to be your X factor?
No.
Okay, so let's talk about Kayvon Thibodeau. Again, for this to work, he has to take a serious step forward. Like, you look at the sack numbers, and they were good last year, but there was times where he went totally quiet and was sometimes even a negative. Like, he needs to be someone who is, again, 5th overall pick. You need to be someone who affects the quarterback every 4 plays. You know, or if beat your offensive lineman. You know, sorry, not every 4 plays, but every 6 plays. Like, he cannot be a guy. He's 71st out of 78 edges in pass rush win rate. That's unacceptable for the 5th overall pick. He needs to, you know, he's not as good as Brian Burns, but like similar talking points with him compared to Brian. Like, he needs to get to a Brian Burns level player, like with what he was invested in him. I'm also excited for Azeez Ojulari in the 3rd edge role now.
Oh, really?
Like, he's been a good player for last year was a down. Last year sucked, but like, his year 2 was really good. He just cannot stay healthy. So I'm being interested to see if, like, as a 3rd down pass rush specialist, not being asked to play a lot of run defense, if he can have like an impact on the team as a 3rd. I mean, you know, like, having a 3rd edge guy is good. The other worry for this team is the defensive tackle depth is pitiful. Jordan Phillips is your other starter, and then you're relying on like 6th and 7th round, you know, 2nd and 3rd year players of like DJ Davidson and Jordan Riley. You have Nacho. Who's like a good, but he only plays run defense, and he's not like a game changer. He's just a solid run defender.
Yep.
And then the linebacker room, like, yeah, Bobby Okereke was phenomenal last season. 5th in force and completions, 1st in completion rate, 5th in pass breakups, 2 interceptions created by tip ups, 4 fumbles. Amazing run defense made guys around him. I don't think he's going to have the same stats in this defense because it's a lot more reading and reacting more so than the Wink Martindale defense of just go, go, go. But he's still going to be just as good. He just may not have the same stats. The question is that 2nd linebacker, Micah McFadden. His numbers were good last year, but does he could struggle in this defense, right? And he's someone that you're probably going to take off the field on 3rd down anyway for Isaiah Simmons. But on 1st and 2nd down, with having to read a little more and not just being fast downhill, will he be someone who becomes a negative instead of the positive that he was last year for the Giants?
Yeah, Bobby Okereke played 100% of the defensive snaps last year. So did Xavier McKinney, but Okereke is still on the team. And going to your point about stats, and that's really what Micah McFadden and Bobby Okereke were really able to do. They were able really to put a lot of stats in the box score. They were the only 2 linebackers, Okereke and McFadden, to have over 100 tackles, at least 10 tackles for loss, and be on the same team. They were one of the best linebacker duos in the NFL last year. And, you know, there's other better linebacker duos like, you know, the Jets, Mosley and Williams. But statistically, they produced very well together. I think Okereke, like you said, is going to be able to handle reading and reacting. But even Okereke struggled a little bit at the start of the season with Wink Martindale, then really got, you know, his shoes wet, his feet wet.
It was almost because he was used to playing in a defense like this, and he was like, it was just like, go, 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 trust what you're doing, trust the guys behind you. So he's going to be like, he's familiar with this type of defense.
Yeah. It's McFadden that you're a little concerned that now that McFadden may be asked to, not think a little bit more, but process more in front of him.
Can't just get downhill.
McFadden has been a very good go, go, go type of player, and they may take that away from him a little bit.
The secondary is also like a real worry. Like they desperately need Deontay Banks and Tyler Newman to be good players right away, right?
Yeah, and Deontay Banks is my X factor.
Okay, Deontay Banks is also my X factor for this team.
Oh, okay.
They traded up a spot for him in the 2023 draft. He looked like he belonged as a rookie, but he was like not a good corner as a rookie, right? Like when you compare him just to every vet, but corner is a position where rookie year, most of them aren't good as rookies, unless they're in a really a scheme that really makes it easy on you and you're a clear cornerback too. But he struggled when he faced wide receiver once. But he looked like he belonged, and they're going to need him to belong next year. They need him to desperately turn into a cornerback one in year two, which he has all the ability in the world to do it. And they need Tyler Newman, their second round pick out of Minnesota, to be good. This defense asks a lot of out of safeties. And then outside of those two guys, you have Cordell Flott and Drew Phillips at the other cornerback spots. That's not a good position to be in. Jason Pinnock was a favorite last year, but he's, again, I think I'm looking at him similar to the way I do Michael McFadden, the linebacker. He's a tell to go type of safety. Just play fast. A lot more is going to be asked out of him this year. So how is he going to live in that role? So the secondary is a huge worry, and that's why, like you said, like you, Deontay Banks is my X factor, because if he's a true cornerback one, it's going to make it a lot easier for the defensive coordinator and the rest of those players, and that pass rush. But if you don't have someone that you trust guarding wide receiver ones, that pass rush could be as good as you want. It's not gonna help. It's not gonna be a good defense.
But the front does have the potential to win football games for you. But it's the potential. And I think it's on Dex is going to bring it. And Dex's his double team rate is going to be the highest in the NFL. I honestly think it will be the highest in the NFL.
This defense is asking for a lot of guys to step up. You have Dexter Lawrence and Bobby Okereke, continue to be who you are, but the rest of this defense is asking Brian Burns, Kayvon Thibodeau, Deontay Banks, Tyler Newman, Drew Phillips. Like, you're asking a lot of guys to make a step up or be good right away as rookies.
Dexter Lawrence is, like I said, he's going to bring it, and he's going to have the highest double team rate in the National Football League now, especially now that Aaron Donald has retired. But the Giants have also, like, the last time that they had a player with 40 career sacks on their team was JPP in 2014. Brian Burns has 46 in 5 years with the Panthers. And the last time the Giants had two players with 10-plus career sack seasons on the roster at the same time was Leonard Williams and Marcus Golden. They're not really bringing any fear. And then even before that, it was Olivier Vernon and JPP in 2016, the last time that they had two players on the roster with 10-plus sack seasons. And I think if you put together like Dexter Lawrence's best season, Brian Burns' second best season, and then Kayvon Thibodeau's 2023, you almost get, like, just between those three players, you get like almost the same production that the entire Giants pass rush unit put up last year.
Oh yeah, so they're going to be a decent unit. It's just they need to be a great pass rushing group to.
Yeah, and they will win. Hopefully that unit will propel them to win football games just on their own.
Yeah,
but the edge has got to show up.
So new additions: you have Drew Lock, Devin Singletary, Jermaine Elmanor, John Runyon, Aaron Stinney, Austin Schlottman, Jordan Phillips, Brian Burns, and Jalen Mills. You lost Tyrod Taylor, Saquon Barkley, Matt Breida, Darren Waller, Tyree Phillips, Ben Bredesen, and Mark Lewinsky, A'Shawn Robinson, Jahad Ward, Adoree Jackson, and Xavier McKinney. The thing I look at is like the offensive line additions versus losses. I really think they should have made an effort to bring back Ben Bredesen, who got $3 million from the Bucs. They lack depth. And I mean, we'll talk about the draft class, but if you look at free agency, I mean, they lost more good players than they added.
Right.
I mean, you lost McKinney, Saquon, Darren Waller, A'Shawn. Adoree had a bad year, but is a good player. And they downgraded a backup QB. And then their ads are Brian Burns, who's probably the best player in the NFL compared, out of all that group. Maybe a healthy Waller is better than those guys. And then you add a couple middle of the road offensive linemen, and then basically just guys, a $3 million per year running back in Singletary, who we like. Jordan Phillips is an okay defensive lineman, and then depth. The draft class, though, we really like the draft class. Malik Neighbors in the first round, he's a guy who hits the ground running. Tyler Newman, arguably the best safety in the class in the second round. Andrew Phillips, we're not as high on that one. He's a nickel corner at Kentucky. Theo Johnson in the fourth round. That's the guy I'm really excited to like. He was my tight end 2 in this class. Waller out. Bellinger is still there. How do they use the tight end room? Theo Johnson is someone who can be a real weapon for you, even if he doesn't do it right away. And then Tyrone Trosi and Darius Moasau in the 5th and 6th round. So we both mentioned our X factors, Deontay Banks. Over under 6.5 wins for this team.
We kind of were negative Nancy's throughout this entire episode, Bobby.
Well, that's just because we know them the best.
Yeah. Dude. They need to win over. They have to go over. They have to.
Think about, I have them at over 2. I think they'll win 7 or 8 games. Think about how, the thing I come back to is think about how badly everything went last year. How badly it went last year. And
also there was dysfunction with the coaches too. Wink, the Dable was freaking out, taking play calling away from Kafka. Wink hated Dable. Dable hated Wink. So there was even instability there.
And they won 6 games, right? And we even talk about the guys we lost. Saquon was not effective last year. Darren Waller missed a good chunk of games last year.
And he was going through his own thing.
Adoree Jackson had a down year. McKinney is the one that played the best that you lose. Which is a shame because McKinney, I think, would have thrived in this type of defense. But even though you did lose good players, they're not guys who you're losing great production from the previous year in which they won 6 games. So I do have them going over. I think with those offensive weapons and that offensive coaching, we know Daniel Jones is not as bad as the public persona right now, but still not a good quarterback. That if Andrew Thomas only misses 2 games. Over.
Yeah.
If Andrew Thomas goes down week 1 and he's out for 5 weeks, then my answer immediately changes to under. But I think that pass rush will be able to take advantage of bad quarterbacks, and that offense will be able to put up enough points for them to get 7 wins. All right. That is football. That is the New York Giants, and this is Football Today.